Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Cinema Savvy. It is myself, George, delighted to be joined by Jed Wagman for the latest installment in the Pixar Retrospective, our first entry of 2026. And we are talking the seventh film the studio produced. Of course, the first film in a series that would go on to have two sequels, the TV series spin-off, another film series spin-off that wasn't Pixar, where my head just had to stop then. We are talking about Cars, released in 2006, directed by John Lasseter. Jed, how are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm excited to talk about Cars. I got Lightning McQueen here with me to talk about Cars.
Excellent. And I'm just going to say this now, before we even get into the preamble. I had to reach out for you specifically on this many months ago, I'm going to add, by the way. The initial concept of the series, and I'm not here to berate what people enjoy. I always had this asterisk against Cars. Like, are there going to be people that want to talk about Cars? And not only am I severely wrong on that, I am going to say that there is a generation of Cars fans, genuine, non-ironic. Yeah, and listen, we're not too dissimilar in age without trying to make you sound like weird. Certain older people cling on to their age gap. We're what, 4 or 5 years difference age-wise, I think. 5 years. And I see you as like the Cars generation, which is fascinating because it's not just you. There are a lot of people that I've seen that love these films. It started to get big in merchandising again. Not that it already wasn't, but like the Star Wars prequels of my group, hey, guess what? That generation works now. So that generation are going to start spending money on Star Wars things, and there are Cars
and I'm the same with Cars things.
Yeah,
I've got a windshield for my car that's got like eyes, so it looks like it's a car from Cars.
And they look great. And this is it. And it's kind of a weird way to introduce this. It's why I needed you on here, because everyone we spoke to, mutual friends, when I mentioned Cars, they've all said there is no way you haven't got Jed on. I was like, no, trust me, he's going to be on for Cars. I'm not going to demand you be on all three. I have had some people reach out about Cars too.
The other two.
Oh, wow. I may take you up on that for Cars 3. I may have a collaboration for Cars 2, which also caught me off guard. And that's coming a lot sooner than we think, because that was the second Disney Pixar series to get a sequel. After Toy Story, it was.
Yeah.
Which is very interesting. And I sit here still, at the age of 29, still demanding his Bugs Life 2 that is never going to happen. I will stick to that credit scene from Toy Story 2 as my only chance of that. But I've gone off a really weird preamble into this. People watching at home, I do want to hear your thoughts on Cars, so please do comment them. Are you a fan or you not? Do you like them? Do you not? Are you maybe neutral? Are they overhated? That's probably a very fair discussion point, because I do feel that at times people have the knives out on that a lot more. But anyone, their thoughts on this, I'd love to hear from them, love to get involved. But Jed, what I was meant to put you on the spot about as an opening, because it's the first time I've had you on the Pixar series. And it may be this is the answer. What are your earliest memories with Pixar?
I mean, my earliest memories of Pixar, it probably is Cars. Like, I don't know if necessarily it is the first film I saw, but it is the first film I remember seeing in the cinema. Was Cars. Maybe I'd seen Toy Story or something at home beforehand, but seeing Cars was my first memory of it, and it was great. It was such a good film. I remember seeing it, going to cinema, and I was like 4 years old, seeing Cars in the cinema and absolutely loving it. And it's one of those things, like you joke, it's like I saw that at 4 years old and based my whole personality on that film. Like, I've got a bunch of cars downstairs, still got them stored away somewhere. All the different cars from the different films, the random car that was in the background of one shot in Cars 1, and all these cars that no one else knows, and I know them all by name, and I've got them all. And yeah, it is Cars, my first memory with Pixar.
I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing at the fact that I've already given the pre-talk about the generation gap, and I'm still sat there like, I feel so old that, and there's not even that much of an age gap. And like kids today, there'll be kids that saw Cars 3 at the cinema for that was their first cinema trip, and I'm sat there. The reason I laugh is because it's not necessarily behind the scenes fact. I'm not doxing you, but I was like, I know that Jed was born on the day the Philosopher's Stone came out of cinemas. Yeah. It's a really, really weird thing that I know, because I think once I would have messaged you happy birthday or whatnot, would have had the chat. and I would have gone on social media and it would have been discussing film. Like today, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone came out, and I once made that connection, and that's how I know your birth year now, 2001.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always nice. Like you were talking before, and you mentioned next year's the 25th anniversary of Harry Potter and Philosopher's Stone. And I was like, yeah, I'm turning 25 next year. It's still like a year away, but yeah,
it's fine. November next year. I mean, Warner Brothers is doing a lot for that. If anyone's curious, this isn't a Harry Potter retrospective series, but there's a lot of things going on for the anniversary. My January the 1st Lego sets have all got a lovely little 25 on the packaging now. I'll be turning 30 next year, for anyone curious. It is a 5-year age gap. There we go. And I am not actually dreading that. I'm just hoping that the World Cup doesn't clash with the Odyssey, because that's what my July is looking like so far. That's all I care about, not my 30th. But I'm excited to get you on for this. I love that you spoke about that already. That I did always wonder, is it the attachment of being not the attachment, but going to the film, your first memories? I've got that bridge to Toy Story because that was my introduction to probably animation as well as Pixar to an extent. Because as a child, you don't know what Pixar means.
Yeah, you just go
maybe
to the
recognize. Yeah, this is it. You see a cool animated thing, you like it, you like more of them. And Cars does have the merchandise, not just because it is Cars. You mentioned it's so varied, it's niche. I've seen people that have collected the Cars before. And I want to sort of very nicely, without going off track too much, no pun intended. There's Star Wars vibes with it, where I know they call them glup shittos in Star Wars, and it's the greatest insult ever because it's became the name of what we used to be called. What are those irrelevant background characters that had a story somewhere? Yeah. Cars actually feels like one of the few films that legitimately has hit that stage where I've seen people pick out something and there's a story somewhere, or it means something elsewhere. And I quite like that I don't think Pixar's really been able to have that away from Toy Story. And it's so interesting that this is the film that spawned a huge franchise within this studio that I think it says, and I'll be the first to say that I do think it is overrated. It's very easy to pile on it, but it's certainly something I've been more aware of in recent years that generation's there. And the same thing I say about the Star Wars sequels, which I've always said about the prequels. I was part of that prequel generation. I was used to people berating that opinion. I grew up. My generation grew up. No one mocks it anymore. The same thing's happened to the sequel generation in 10 years. When those kids are old enough, they will have their fans. They might have had their characters pop up, but it doesn't look like we're getting the hunt for Kylo Ren anytime soon, though. But that's still my big what if of the year. But let's talk some more Cars before I end up talking about Kylo Ren too much. We'll kickstart, as we always do, with the IMDb plot synopsis. And this one is, on the way to the biggest race of his life, a hotshot rookie race car gets stranded in a rundown town and learns that winning isn't everything in life. Very simple to the point from IMDb. I've just recorded a Christmas video today, and we do letterbox for them, and they're too long. They're like 2 paragraphs at a time, so IMDb has my respect on this. But I'm going to kickstart my memories on this, because I know you mentioned this is the first film we saw at the cinema.
Yeah.
I'll ask you a little bit more about your history of Cars 2 in a moment, but you might be shocked when I say this. Rewatching this on Saturday is the second time in my life I've seen this film in full.
Really? You've got to watch it more often. I watch it every year, every 6 months.
It's wild. So I can tell you the first time I saw this, and I run this channel, so I'm not going to get told off. A friend of mine brought a bootleg DVD round, and this would have been like maybe late 2006, so 2007. I was still at primary school. And I just remember watching this DVD, and it froze when he's being pulled out of the, what's it called? When he goes off the cliff in the race with Hudson.
Yeah.
I just remember it being frozen on his tongue sticking out with all the cactuses and everything. Well, cacti, I don't know, that's the plural term. But I remember watching it and just not having an opinion on it. And then there was a second one, and then there was a third one. And I'd see the stuff online, and I just never had that. It got me. But again, recent years, Kachow has become a thing. Cars merchandising is everywhere. And it's genuinely, and I mean this all intents and purposes, one of the films in this series that I'm been most intrigued to go back to, because I know I haven't seen it properly in, let's say, 20 years pretty much now. Which it was nice to go and revisit. And yeah, I can't say too much because I know there's 2 more Cars films, but as you can tell, I don't have a history with it. I've not seen, I will add, I've not seen the spin-offs. I've not seen Planes. I've not seen any of
I've
that.
only seen Planes 1. I think I never saw the second one.
They made a second one?
Yeah, Planes, Fire and Rescue.
Oh wow! I mean, there's a lot to take into account there, and I could get in trouble if I say what I want to say. We showed Paul a joke we shouldn't have after the first episode, but it just raises the question of. It's like sorry to go off topic. In Cars 3, they talk about iPhones and phones, but I'm sat there. How?
There are just so many questions that the Cars franchise raises. You've got the car Pope in Cars 2 with car Christianity. You've got post 9/11 airport style security in Cars 2.
Well, that was what I was going to say then, because theoretically then that means in Planes and in the Cars world, and sorry to go into this topic because it's way too ridiculous, but when you look at historical events, right, I have a couple of questions. Was there a Cars Titanic? Like, were they all cargo going across the ocean? Because if you got boats, you got the Titanic. You mentioned Christianity. I won't get into religion. We don't talk that on the channel. But does that have implications of real world history? Is there a car
I'm just
Jesus?
Trying to think, how does a car get crucified, like physically?
Well, yeah, this is what I'm sat there like. It asks so many questions. Clarice Lockery we had on for Monsters Inc. We joked about it. She said, does that mean that if there's a Cars Pope, is there a Cars? Did we say King Henry VIII and his wives and everything else? Like there are so many questions.
Car Queen Elizabeth and a Prince William. Like there is a car royal family.
Thankfully, he who must not be named is stripped of his titles. Didn't get a great pun for his name. But this is it. It asks so many questions, and I know that's not part of the schedule, and I'm really just spitballing, but I can't have this discussion without bringing some of these things up. But I'm glad you're aware of this too.
But then there are so many questions that the Cars franchise raises that aren't even like huge world questions. Like in the first film, when Mater drives backwards and he's saying, I can drive backwards, this is great. Do you know why I can drive backwards? Because I've got wing mirrors. No one mentions that his wing mirrors are behind his eyes. Like I can't see my ears. How does he use his wing mirrors to drive backwards if he can't see the wing mirrors? Like
I see this is going to blow my mind. I don't want to come on here to interrogate because the way the internet works, right? And you just send this, you'll get a nice innocent person go on a podcast or something. I don't want to sound like a desperate. I'm your friend. We are friends outside of this for people that don't know. But I know that some types of YouTubers would just bring someone to bombard them to mock and berate, which I've got no intention of doing, but I am actually desperate to learn more about. And you're now raising questions to me that I just could never, ever have considered.
Yeah. Like every time I have a conversation like this with someone, there is a new question that I hadn't thought of. Like another one. Sometimes the cars drink oil as like a drink, but they've also got like gas pump, like how you would put oil in a normal car. Like, do they drink it through their mouth? Do you put it in? Like, what's the difference between it? How do the cars run? Like, so many questions.
It's like, who's building the phones? Who's making the Lightning McQueen merchandise to go inside of Mac? It's those kinds of things that it had me going, and I guess it adds to the conversation. But you're right. I'm glad you have those chats as well, and it does add to Cars as an entity. My favorite online discussion is, I know we're saying this before the films come out, the classic, what's Avatar done for cultural discourse? I'm like, isn't that becoming the placeholder of what's Avatar done culturally? The answer that is like one of its many things. But there's so many more questions. I mean, I'll try and get back to the schedule. I mentioned your memories with Cars. Do we have much more past that? I mean, I don't want to be like in terms of did it shape you as a man? It's a car, but
I mean, I've been obsessed with the film since I saw Cars 2 and Cars 3 in the cinema, but not a whole lot beyond that. Like I liked the film in the same way that most kids like the films. Like every film I saw when I was that age immediately was my favorite film of all time. I saw Cars and loved it. Then I saw Chicken Little like a year later and also loved that. And then I saw Ratatouille a year later and loved that. Like part of it was that any film you see at that age is great and you love it. But I've always come back to Cars, and I still always go back to Chicken Little and Ratatouille and Meet the Robinsons as well. It's not just Cars. But yeah, I've just loved all the films since, the spin-offs, the shorts.
Very fair. I mean, the mid-noughties for animated films is interesting because 5 years isn't a generational difference, but I think growing up it is.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like the memories you've got there, I'd be saying that's like my Toy Story 2s, my Bugs Lives.
But especially with kids' films, there gets to an age where when you become like a teenager, it's not cool to like Disney films and animated films. And you get to an age where it's like, I need to stop watching these, or I feel I should stop watching them or not talk about them with friends, or maybe you do stop watching them entirely. And it's like, so there is quite that gap, because maybe even though I'm only 5 years younger, the films that I was watching, you might have been like, I'm not watching Meet the Robinsons in the cinema. That's so not cool.
Yeah, I've got a really bad story of Alvin and the Chipmunks, the squeakquel.
Does anyone have good stories with that?
Well, no. I mean, the story was I was meant to watch Avatar 1 with some friends, and no one knew anything about Avatar. It was this, oh my God, everyone's talking about Avatar. I had two friends. I say a story. I always say a story, but I like it. Two friends' birthday. They're like 3 days apart. The old secondary school thing. We will go. It's Christmas time to the cinema. So watch this Avatar. We rock up to the cinema. This is the days of before booking online. And turns out two of the 4 of us have watched it the night before. And thus we were forced to watch Alvin and the Chipmunks, the Squeakquel, over Avatar 1. I did go into Avatar 1 about a week later on Boxing Day, I will add. But I was not impressed. I saw it eventually. Yeah, and now, almost 20 years later, there's now 3 Avatar films, which is wild. From nothing in 15 years to 2 in 3 years. Who'd have ever thought it? It was real all along. But let's talk a little bit of behind the scenes. So this is an interesting one. So what I will say about Cars, all jokes aside, as you rightfully point out, you hit an age and the films you watch in childhood that is not cool. 2006 is my Star Wars has finished age. I'm watching Doctor Who at this point in time because I have distinct memories of David Tennant, Doctor Who era, Chris Eccleston. And I know this is pre-08 where I get really into film stuff. So I'm in probably a very weird position interest-wise. I wouldn't know any behind the scenes. I hadn't seen many of the films that came after this. Whereas the ones we spoke about previously, I've got sufficient childhood memories. I knew a little bit more. I couldn't ever tell you I've looked at the behind the scenes of the making of Cars. But I have now for this, and I've been able to not necessarily educate myself, but I've found it very fascinating to read about. And a big one for this was Cars, or a version of Cars, was originally going to be the 3rd Pixar film after A Bug's Life. And this kind of throws me quite a bit. So Jürgen Klubayan, I've got no idea if that's how it's pronounced. He was working on a concept, and this is, for key context people, 1998. The concept was an electric car living in a gas world. Basically, the Ugly Duckling of the childhood books, if people can remember that. And that's insane because electric cars is sort of a thing now. And even that's in its infancy, yet someone, 25 plus, the late 90s was thinking about it already. And I find that incredible. But that would get shelved. Toy Story 2 would be the 3rd Pixar film, I must say. They made the right choice of that one. But then John Lasseter would go on a family road trip in the year 2000. I think he had 5 children he went with. They did Route 66, which, when you know this, it's very evident the inspirations behind these. This big road trip he did. Apparently, he's big on his cars. No pun intended. He would then use that road trip as an influence, and they would go back to that story of Cars and turn it basically into a completely different film, I guess, bar the fact cars talk and are animated. To the point that this was almost called Route 66. Which, if I'm going to be really honest and give Cars a massive bit of credit, this can't be called Route 66. It has to be called Cars. It's so strange it was almost called something else, because I don't want to sound like, it doesn't look like it'd be a franchise. I don't think you can have a Route 66 franchise.
What's the
And I
next one?
think,
Route 67, Route 68.
well, this is it. And it's like, then you're going to get prequels like Route 65, and does have to be set on a different motorway for each entry. That would raise more questions than the cars were already asked about. But
We've got enough questions. We don't need to ask about which other routes we need to look at.
yeah, and I found it fascinating that Lasseter would do this because he hasn't directed one of the core Pixar films since Bug's Life at this point in time, leading to Cars, which also caught me off guard a little bit more. I know obviously he's the head of Pixar at this point in time, but I found it fascinating that this is the project he aligned himself with. The writer who was involved, Jorgen, was written out of a writing credit. He was just left, I think, on story credit, which it's the way the industry goes. That sounds like a corporate guy. Obviously, he had the original idea. He spoke about it. He says, he was fired from the production. He knows now what it's like to see his film released, but also not being his film. I'm definitely not a studio person. It sounds like I'm going to side of a studio. I'm trying not to. I'm just trying to make the point that when Lasseter's head of Pixar, I guess like anything he wants to do is going to go. And it feels like two completely different films. Like if this was an electric car, who was an electric race car on his own, I'd see all of those crossovers, but it really doesn't feel like there's much, does it, in terms of an actual...
Yeah, there's not a whole lot that seems to have been carried over.
No, and I think that's why I'm a bit more neutral on that. Obviously, it's not great for the person who got the story credit, but at the same time, it's when it ends up being a completed film, you might not even want the attachment to it. I'm not going to sit there and say, oh...
But who wouldn't want the attachment to Disney Pixar's Cars,
Well, yeah, exactly. And contextually as well, this is the studio, and this is the film people maybe start to question, or this is the one they pick on, but this opening run of films, it's just juggernauts, one after the other, after the other, after the other. It's another original concept. And this time it's, what if cars could talk and have their own civilization? And obviously, as we said, we can't keep asking the questions of what that means, but for an animation project, it's okay. No humans, which we know Pixar had struggled with leading up to The Incredibles. Bit like a Bug's Life. You're only going to get, bugs, in this case cars. You're not going to get anything else. And I find it a really interesting story for them to do. Now, there is a noticeable gap between The Incredibles and Cars. It is worth bringing up some behind-the-scenes politics. This would be the last the last Pixar film before the Disney acquisition, which, as a child, I had no idea Disney bought Pixar until I was older, because I just assumed they already were Disney when I was younger because it had the Disney castle at the start. Just to be that guy that says that. But Steve Jobs would delay this film on purpose to use it as a negotiation tactic, which I find was fascinating. And again, younger me always forgets that Steve Jobs was also part of Pixar.
Yeah.
I know, again, not too much of years ago, but I don't know if you can remember when he died. That sounds so weird. There's certain celebrities where you remember the deaths.
No, I know what you mean.
I remember when Steve Jobs dying, it was huge. Not Michael Jackson levels. That's probably still the biggest, if I'm honest. But I don't ever remember people talking about Pixar when he died.
Yeah,
and that sounds really horrible. Yeah, this is it. And it's because was it 2011 when he passed away? I was 15. Everything was Apple this, Apple that, the iPhone. And I understand all of that. Whereas obviously at that point in time, I'm not invested in the film industry like I would be now. But it's kind of crazy to think that Steve Jobs was, one of the two biggest parts of Pixar at this point in time, and that he had the power to negotiate with Disney, which is kind of, without God knows what's going to happen the next 4 weeks. But in current politics, we've got the whole Netflix, Paramount, Warner Brothers triangle going on. You add in a household name like that, to decide, that's big pulling powers. And I know, without trying to go on a different topic, I know that after he passed away, that Bob Iger has said, we'd always envisioned Apple being part of Disney, and I was like, that would never have happened. Not me being a dick and getting into a different conversation, but I don't think Disney could afford to buy Apple. I kind of think it'd be the other way around, but I also don't know if they could afford to buy. I just don't see the need for that, if that makes
It could
sense.
still happen one day.
I mean, I believe Steve Jobs' family are the largest shareholders in Disney of individuals, which is very different conversation. Sorry to segue onto this, but it is fascinating that there is behind the scenes politics in the films that we grew up with, and something I've noticed a couple of episodes into the series. I don't know if it might be the same for yourself. When you've got childhood films like this that are important to you, that you know off the back of your hand, when you do start finding out behind the scenes, it's kind of incredible because you're like, whoa, I never knew this. Whereas us today, who obviously is older, who knows about productions of films, is like, we'll get to, not saying this is an example, but you'd get to later ones, but yeah, I remember all that happening behind the scenes. There'll be people that never do. And I just find it very interesting, the Cars conversation with Disney. Sorry, I've gone on a proper tangent there. What was yours?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, like you say, like when you watch these films when you're younger, you know nothing about these behind the scenes things. You don't care about them and you don't want to seek them out. But then when you're older and you learn these things, it is interesting to hear about these things that happened, and that, you know, this film could have come out a couple of years earlier if none of this had happened. And what would the film have been like a couple of years earlier? You know, these things can change quite a lot of what the film ends up looking like. But you never know what would have happened otherwise. But it is interesting to hear all these stories of what happened in the making of it. But the film we got is the film we got. So I feel when you're looking back on it, hearing these stories of the production isn't as interesting as when you're living it and hearing current production stories of films that are in production, how the film we're going to see in 2 years' time is changing. Whereas the film for 20 years ago, that's the film we've got, and we'll never know what would have been different. We'll never know what would have happened to Pixar if Steve Jobs was still alive today or any of that stuff. Whereas I kind of more interested in production stuff of films that are going on now, because the film we're seeing in a year's time, in 2 years' time, 3 years' time will be affected by what's going on today.
Yeah, very well said. It's like random one to bring like Heat 2. You know, we're recording this on the 11th of December. Leo's announced himself, and Leo, who never gives interviews, is saying he's going to be in Heat 2. And it's like there have been so many names rumored for the last 18 months, and you've got Leonardo DiCaprio saying, yeah, it's me, which different conversation, but one day that's going to be a Wikipedia entry where it's like, this person was considered, but it went to Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yeah, and exactly. It's like right now, Leonardo DiCaprio is in Heat, but supposing something happens in 6 months and he has to pull out of it, you know, we might never get that film.
Exactly. It's fascinating. And that's why I love the behind the scenes stuff. And with a retrospective like this, with animation, talking about a studio, we get to talk about developments. And this is really interesting, not in a disrespectful way. So many of these early episodes have been like, Pixar developed fur, Pixar developed computer animation, landscapes. We're hitting the point 7 films in, let's say 11 years into them making feature-length films as a studio. They've kind of nailed down animation. And I'm not saying, oh, we're not going to talk about animation before, we absolutely are. But the radical developments of the early days have, I'm going to say, been almost perfected at this point in time. And I will say this about Cars. Watching it today, I mean, not to sound arrogant, I've got a pretty decent setup for these films. I own them all on Blu-ray at a minimum. So I'm watching them off the discs and whatnot. 2006 Cars looks phenomenal still. And the early films all look phenomenal. But again, when there's no humans and you're animating cars, I'm not saying that's easy to animate. It's absolutely not. But it means the more noticeable things are going to be the designs of the cars, right? It's going to be the backgrounds and...
But there are so many things, like the way that the light shines off the metal of the car
exactly.
that looks so good in this film. And it's like, you don't think about that if you think, oh, it's just an animated car, you know, but the reflection of light and all these things, it's like, that is important. Like, how does the light shine off the side of a car?
And this is where I talk very rarely about video games. What threw me on this was they were developing ray tracing. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but that is, ray tracing is the reflection. So I know it through the games industry because I'm not a techie when it comes to games. And when the PS5 came out, you get all these options like, do you want your screen to look better in 4K? Or do you want it to look like 1080p, but with less frames? Or, you know, all those kinds of choices you can make.
Yeah.
And I'm just sat there, and I remember what the Spider-Man PS5 game was like. On a PS4 Pro, you now get to have ray tracing technology where it's like the window reflects and you see yourself. And I remember these gamers going, man, I'm like, cool. And that's Cars. And they were developing ray tracing for the reflections on the cars. And I thought, wow, like, not all this is impressive. I'd never ever considered Cars would need something like ray tracing, where actually it's so important yet so obvious that it would.
It's the sort of thing, if the film didn't have that, you might not be going, where is this? Where's the ray tracing? Why isn't the light reflecting of the car like that? But when it is there, it's so noticeable, and it really does complete the experience.
Yeah, it makes a massive difference, I think, to the look. And I think the choice of Route 66, the desert landscapes, that plays a big part of this. And another thing that threw me was, and I didn't even know this would be needed for computer animation, digital matte paintings. That threw me. And I'm not sit here, old man yells at cloud. I love it when I see matte paintings behind the scenes on productions. I love it even more when I'm going to use the 1980s Tron film as a recent example. Without getting on a home media tangent, 4K for me is the best form of home media. Not just because it's the best, but when an old film is correctly restored, almost frame by frame, with dedicated people doing so, it looks better than Blu-ray ever did. And I'm not saying it's because it's a better resolution. I mean, there is something about the process they're doing with 4K films where celluloid films have been much better, whereas Blu-ray is a bit more digital. And you're at this boundary where the older films are now looking the way they should, and the more recent digital 1080p films look a little bit limited because they were filmed and shot on 1080p cameras 20 plus years ago. 1980s Tron had the amazing matte painting of the room, but you can now start to see the clear matte painting in the shot. And it's not a criticism at all, but I love that you get to see these tiny little things that make no difference to anyone else. But I couldn't believe, I was like, they did matte paintings in Pixar. I just kind of want to know, like, how is that possible? Like, I know that it's possible because they did it, but did you know anything about that? Because it's hard for me to visualize.
Yeah, I've got no idea about this.
It's but this is it, right? And this is the film everyone would bash. And we're talking about ideas, new forms of animation, and again, context of 2006, Pixar are continuing to develop new technologies. They're continuing to develop their animation. You do a film about cars, as you said, right? You need to get things like the reflections to work. It comes with its own risks. You want to do a stadium, you want to do a race, you need to animate, 100,000 cars?
Thousands, 100,000 cars in a stadium.
It's remarkable. And I do think this film absolutely has that with the animation standpoint. The concept, the designs of the cars, even what you mentioned with your own car's windshield. A lot of animated films have always put the eyes of animated cars in the headlights.
Yeah. Not to go back to this question of so many questions in the Cars universe, but in Cars 2, there is a car that's got the eyes in the headlights. So how does that work?
It's like a different generation. I don't want to say like a Frankenstein appointment, but it could be something. But I find it interesting, and from an animation point, I mean, let's talk the cars themselves. I guess we're so used to how this is animated, right, that it's the norm. But take out what we know, it is quite genius for the windshields to be the eyes.
Yeah,
right?
You get more expression out of them as well. Like, it is much better, I think, on the eyes than on the windshield, than on the headlights.
Yeah, and I think even some of the characters, like, you want to give them a moustache, you just give them a grill on the car. Yeah. And it makes it work so much better than I think it has any probably right. Whoever invented that, or maybe tested it once, they must have just been like, what can we do to make it work? And they absolutely did. And I don't know how that process worked, whether they had to evolve the eyes. That sounds so weird to say out loud. But they wouldn't have just slapped two eyeballs on it. They'd have had to have found a way to really do so. And I think it's one of the best things they did in this film. Again, with the animation, I can't, like so many Pixar, I can't fault the animation itself. It's the top of the game. Contextually, mid-noughties, Pixar continues to be on the rise. People may argue that Disney animation were on the way down at that point in time. Obviously, it's like apples and oranges. They're completely different forms of animation, different studios. But certainly Pixar were the ones setting the benchmark. And I never felt like they were getting sloppy. Sorry, I didn't mean to say that. Side tangent, slop has probably become the worst word in film industry at the moment. But sloppy isn't a criticism, but where I'm trying to go with that is I don't think we see Pixar anymore like pushing the boundaries like they used to. And I think
But is that because there are less boundaries to be pushing? Like when you push the boundary 20 times, like yes, there is always somewhere further you can go, but it's not as groundbreaking because you've done everything.
This is it. And Paul's got a really fascinating theory, and I'll always say on this because it's such a great point, is when Pixar had basically been like, right, we've got humans. We can do them. We know how to do them. We know what we want to do with them. He isn't lazy. The way he said it was a really interesting logic of now that they can do humans, it's all the stories are about human characters, not necessarily before where we were limited by our technology. So we had to find ways to do things about toys or about bugs, cars, monsters. Ironically, should have been harder than humans, but it wasn't. Fish. He says it's because there's almost nothing left for them to reach that the story is now naturally more about humans. And I find that really interesting that I definitely agree with that. It's obviously a lot more layered than that as well. But as you said, what other boundaries are there left? Of course, someone somewhere will find something, but when the games industry, which is a big part of animation now as well, keeps pushing, those budgets get higher and higher on top of that. There isn't as many avenues to be explored. And
especially I think like the obvious one when it comes to like people is make them look more photorealistic. But it's like, do you want that in animated films? Whilst it's not Pixar, when you've got the live action Lion King and Jungle Book where they've got these photorealistic animals, it's like that doesn't always work in animation. So where is the next place to go forward beyond just making it that bit clearer and crisper, the animation?
Yeah, and I think certainly animation, I feel like we're getting a shift back towards 2D animation in a really delightful way that Pixar was so great, everyone suddenly needed to be Pixar and do 3D when it should always be, hey, if you guys want to do a 2D animation, you want it to look like a certain way, then go for it. And it's certainly questions that have happened within studios. We're getting the John Cena, is it Coyote versus Acme next year or the year after? Yeah. That's finally coming out. We're getting the blend of actors again with animation, and it's a really fascinating part of the industry. And I think we're getting to see more and more new studios coming through as well. I think Leica's the one that everyone uses as a demo in recent years for sort of trying to push the envelope a little bit more again. But yeah, it raises a great question. I mean, talking cars as well. We're not just talking animation the series, but of course talking the story. Let's get into this. Let's get into the story a little bit more. So I kind of want to not throw you on the spot, but it's quite a simple story. Lightning McQueen, the sensational young rookie, he's got all the arrogance in the world. He thinks he's the best driver in the world. He's there to win his first Piston Cup in his rookie season. He's going to replace the king as the head of Dynaco. He needs to have his reality check, the very traditional into the wilderness to find yourself, to discover yourself, to realize there's more to life than yourself, that you need a team, you need a group of people, and then you'll get your big finale, big moment. I really appreciate the storytelling in this because as someone that's watched motorsport for, let's just say, just under 20 years at this point in time, I've always found it fascinating, the media representation of trying to do motorsport. And that's a very weird tangent. I'm going to try not to talk about F1 too much, although there has been a big event this week that is being compared to cars a lot, which I'll get to a little bit later. And obviously, people watching home, that'll be in the future. So it would have been a month ago. What are your thoughts on the story, the choice of someone like Lightning McQueen being the lead rather than, let's say, the King focusing on an older veteran? Because it's the first time since A Bug's Life, this is the first real, lone protagonists that isn't a duo. It's not a group of people. It's Lightning McQueen. Okay, we get Radiator Springs. But what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's an interesting way of doing it, especially because in the first film, it is just Lightning McQueen, whereas in the second one, you get a bit more Mater as well, and some of the other characters, and you get Finn McMissile, and in the third one, you get McQueen, and you get a few more characters, whereas the first one, he is the main protagonist, and it is just him, which I think is the best way of doing it, sharing his story. It's the people that it's the friends you meet along the way, that sort of thing. But it is his story, and it's got to be just him with all these other characters that come into it.
I agree. I really appreciate it. And I think, again, going to the racing side of things, it's the most you can do. That I think it'd be too boring if the whole film was just here's him in a season. Here's this rookie coming through the ranks, getting good.
Yeah, there's only so many times you can show some cars driving around in a circle, like before that gets boring. And I know you're a fan of F1.
This don't be worry. No, I agree. And the
like,
international rivalry
in an animated film that's 90 minutes long, you don't want to see 10 races. Like, you can have one at the start, one at the end, maybe one in the middle, but like, you can't just show a season of racing.
Exactly. And I think Lasseter finds a way to make it work, that they know what they want to do with the story with the characters and where it leads to. And you are bang on. No one wants to watch the cars go around in a circle all day. Even when, and that's where I'd say some films have failed doing motorsport, where they think people only care. Like, no, you get a great story, you build around that story, and then you can include the racing in.
But
I think with the concept of cars,
the opening scene of Cars, I do genuinely think is one of the best openings of like any film. That whole race scene is incredible. Like, especially as a way of setting up the film and setting up the character of McQueen, it is incredible.
I agree. I think it's one of the strongest openings for Pixar. I think for a racing concept, it's the right way to start a racing film. And that sounds really weird.
You got to start with a race.
Yeah, start with the race. You can pinpoint the identity of 3 characters straight away. You can, Lightning McQueen, the quick one, the young one, the arrogant one. Absolutely no shame in that. I know the king isn't really like developed as the king at this point, but you can tell he's like, okay, this is the best on the grids. Yeah, you can tell he's the best on the grids. And then obviously you're going to get Chick as well, who you can tell, okay, he's going to kind of be an antagonist in this film. How is it all going to work out? And it does a great job of that. And I think then where it goes with the story is having the reality check that he goes into the desert. He finds himself after a week that you get to introduce these other cars, these other types of people, these other types of cars who have all the different experiences in their own lives. I think it works so much better. The fact that if you're going to do this vivid world, as you said, right, you don't just want racing, you need more. You can't do racing for an hour and a half. By showing the different older cars, younger cars, some very funny jokes. There's a lot of
more questions about the cars universe. Sorry, like Lightning McQueen, he is a race car. If you're born a race car, do you have to be a race car? The sheriff
like Man of Steel.
Springs, if you're born as a police car, do you have to become a police officer? Like, sorry, just too many questions.
No, that's fair. I mean, I guess it'd give you a different rap, right? Unless it's a fired engine or something. Maybe they can have a job prospect change. It's a bit like, without getting to Harry Potter, the criticism online of, like, in canon criticism, there's a lot of criticisms of it online, but in canon's like, oh, you know how it's like you get sorted into a house, it's like that's your destiny. You're telling that no matter what job you have in the future, you always remember the house you were put in when you're like 10 years old.
Yeah.
So you didn't get much of a choice. You're told you're going to be a bad person, you go on Slytherin. It is like them. It's Man of Steel is a great where it's like there's a codex, isn't it? Where it's like you're programmed to be this, you'll always be this. And I think Cars, I mean, there are spies that pop up in the second one. There are future race cars in the third one. You're right. It's just going to keep asking more questions. But let's really nail it. Talk about a couple of the characters. You mentioned Lightning McQueen. I think it's very fair. We kickstart Owen Wilson. Gonna say this too. Contextually, 2006. You can disagree with me if you want. This is the biggest name to be in a Pixar film in terms of current stature since Tom Hanks in Toy Story.
Yeah,
I'm not saying it means he's a better actor than anybody else that's done Pixar. What I mean is like that popularity level of, okay, I know this was yours first on the cinema. Obviously, I was 10. I knew who Lightning McQueen was because I loved Zoolander. And I'd seen a lot of those kind of Owen Wilson comedies by this point. And I recognized the voice of Lightning McQueen. And it's quite, I think personally, a big name for an animated film. And I know there's always that discussion online of, do they take voice actors away? I don't think they do. But I think Owen Wilson works for Lightning McQueen. I think there's ironically, he's meant to be playing the young hotshot. They could have got a typical jock type actor, but I don't think it would have worked. I think
it
Owen
works
Wilson.
as Owen Wilson.
Yeah, like there's comedy, but he's got the right voice to go on a car. That sounds so strange to say, but it stands out. And I know this film brings in a lot of cameos of people that will stand out for varying reasons, but so many actors would have just blended in and not felt like any personality. Whereas I think Owen Wilson was sort of perfect to play Lightning McQueen.
The whole cast feels like that, you know, like even though like Owen Wilson's not necessarily the biggest name, you know, you got Paul Newman, you got Michael Keaton, like big names, not necessarily to kids that are watching it, but like they're big names playing big characters as well. They're not playing some background card that has one line. You know, like Paul Newman in an animated film, that's huge.
This is it, and I think. I mean, the Paul Newman is one of his final films, and the background with him, he's a massive racing fan. Apparently, behind the scenes, he had his own collection of cars. He would do a lot of the racing, and I like it when they not just bring in actors for the sake of their name, but he would have an attachment to wanting this. Probably not being judgmental, but as an older actor, probably thought, you know, voice work, easy gig. But if he's got an interest in cars, he can play the retired former car champion, and they didn't need to get a real motorsport driver for that. We'll talk about one or two later on, but I do think it's a big coup for Pixar. And apparently, obviously, I've got no memory of this. The marketing campaign was very, very heavily on the fact it's Owen Wilson, was very heavily on the fact it's Paul Newman, that it was such a big pull for them to get the two, that they were over the marketing, which is interesting. We're starting to see that move into let's keep promoting the big names you've got. But you kind of need to promote them when it's an original concept too, that I still don't think in the year 2006 you can put a Pixar logo on it and the whole world are going to go.
Yeah.
Although they know the films that the studio would have made, you still need to market to the general audience, which I think film fans seem to forget about more so than often. That when we're in our bubbles, we know what's on, but the people around, it's like James Bond. The best comment I've ever read about, whenever they cast a James Bond, someone says it should be an actor that you're aware of, but not one of your parents. Which is like a really interesting backhanded compliment. Like they're kind of there, but they're not household, but they're going to be. And I think for cars, they sort of get it right with these and the characters themselves. I mean, Lightning McQueen, this is probably his best film of the three, where it is about him, it is about character development, and kind of without criticizing the sequels, it's evident as to why, because this is the film about how he does mature and he's going to become a champion. He's got to have this. It's like Woody in Toy Story. Like, you know, Woody's the villain of Toy Story 1. He's a narcissistic, evil toy. But it's about him developing over time and realizing, you know, he's wrong.
It's about them becoming a character that is good enough to be the protagonist and the character that everyone loves in 2 and 3 and in all the sequels.
Yeah, nailed it. And I think Lightning McQueen is that. And I think they get that by the cars. I'm laughing because I'm really getting in on the cast talk now. And it works because they surround the right cars and the right characters, the right cast around him for this. And I mean, if we talk very briefly about Mater, I've never been familiar with Larry the Cable Guy. I'm allowed to say that. I just don't know why. I've never really seen him anything but cars. Mater's a type of character I'm going to say it, I don't like. Never liked him. I know that's going to upset some people, but you know what? His comic relief.
Yeah.
And it's going to work.
And the film.
Yeah. And it does work. And he's very popular with audiences as well. And he's quite innocent as well. Like, it's the, hey, could we do a hillbilly? Okay, let's make it like a rusty old kind of van type thing. And it's like, yeah, it works. Like, it's not offensive. But I was like, it works. And that then becomes part of Lightning McQueen, where, you know, he's like, I don't want to be friends with like rusty people. I'm above all this. And even those minor moments, him thinking, well, I don't really need to be above this. Like, I'm not going to get into like a class discussion either, but it raises like philosophical questions. I never thought I'd be saying that about a Cars film, but he does function as the friend, and you do feel sorry for him as the film goes on, and then you do believe their friendship for where it is going to go. Maybe things get a bit too wild in the second one, if I'm allowed to say so myself, but that's the part that everyone loves with it too.
Yeah. Yeah, without going into Cars 2, because I know that's a whole separate video, but the Spy Cars is great. And maybe the fact that they make Mate the main character more than Lightning in that, not so much.
I kind of agree. I think, yeah, when it gets to that, that's the big discussion point. But again, when you've done everything you can do with Lightning McQueen in terms of his probable story, because
You've got
again,
to have someone else to bring in and to share that screen with him.
Exactly. And I think a fantastic character in this is Doc Hudson, played by Paul Newman, who we spoke about. The mentor figure, the former racer who doesn't like racers. The fact he just wanted to get Lightning McQueen out of his way. He's kind of he's not a villain, but there are some moments, when he calls again, how do you tip off the media in the car? That's too many questions. But I think Doc Hudson's what makes or breaks this film for me as a viewer. That as in it works. There's got to be a mentor figure, and it sounds so weird because it's a very traditional, like, Chosen One story, layer philosophical.
It is the same story we've seen a bunch of times elsewhere, but it works so well. Like when Lightning McQueen goes into his office and sees the piston cups and the news stories about the Hudson Hornet, like it just works so well.
It makes sense, and I think it makes it feel a bit more real. Like, again, from my background with what I enjoy as a hobby, obviously don't get to do it from a hobby, but you get world champions and they're forgotten about overnight. That's happened. It does happen. It will continue to happen. Driver gets an injury, has to retire. There will be a star that rises up tomorrow and takes over that, especially within cultures as well. I don't think it's just car racing. You could probably look at like musicians, actors. It is, I don't want to say a popularity contest, but it's understandable as to why people do want to just have a quiet life and move away and disappear. And I think Doc Hudson's a character who I really like with that. And again, I've not seen a lot of Paul Newman's. Obviously, I'm familiar with him as an actor, his legacy, his reputation, but I don't think it can be understated the coup to have him in this. A bit like Michael. Michael Caine's more understandable because he'd done so many commercial films by the time of Cars 2. But Michael Caine's coup, I think, really, if I'm allowed to say this, was when he goes to do Batman Begins, and then he's starting to be in these big films again and continues to do so. Whereas Paul Newman was obviously more selective, and this being one of his final roles, bookmarks and bookends, what is an incredible career with that. But yeah, anything you want to say on Hudson before we talk about another one? Because I want to talk about someone I didn't know was in this film.
Okay, we can move on to them.
Okay. I'm not joking. I didn't know Michael Keaton was in this film until this week.
Yeah.
I had no knowledge at all that this was Michael Keaton in Cars. For those that don't know, sorry, I've jumped in way too extreme. Chick Hicks is voiced by Michael Keaton, which is wild to say out loud because Michael Keaton's never had the mustache like that that you think. You might be thinking, oh, it's going to be like a, how do I say this really nicely? Like the King's, the actor of the King is, oh God, I've forgotten his name, but there's a certain stereotype around certain voice actors, particularly in racing scenarios. Keaton's perfect as Chick. He makes an incredible antagonist. He's immediately dislikable. He's a cheat in the sport. He is like trying to kill people in the race, by the way, I'm going to say.
But is it another big question? How do cars die? If you have a crash, are they dead? Are they broken like limbs? Like, is he trying to kill people?
I mean, what does that then make a scrapyard? But they exist. When they become little square boxes of metal. That might be their version of a.
Because no one seems that concerned that he is trying to kill other cars, so maybe he's not killing them. Because I feel if you were trying to kill another car, that would seem a bit more extreme, and they might stop you racing.
I did think this again. This is the F1 stuff. I was like, how is he just keeps getting away with this? I know it's obviously a film, but I was sat there like, all these other cars seem very nice, and there's just the one guy there who's like, nope, I'm going to cause a crash every time. I mean, I will say Michael Keaton doesn't get a lot to do, but it's a very fun character. And if I'm honest, it's a very real character within motorsport as well. Like there are drivers. It's the they'll stop at nothing to win type mentality. The comparison I'm desperate to make is the real life scenario where, for anyone that watches Formula One, Lando Norris is now the world champion. Without turning into F1 podcast, my official point of view is the worst world champion since 1982 is my recommendation of him. Heading into the final race of the Piston Cup, right? The trailer itself says the legend, the rookie, and the runner-up. That's like the in-cars canon advert. Now, in the real-life F1 side of things, heading into the final race of the season, there was a three-way battle for the title. You had Max Verstappen, who's won 4 titles in a row. Oscar Piastri in his 3rd season, he's the youngest, the rookie, as you could call it. Verstappen, the legend, you know where we're going here. And Chick Hicks is the runner-up, which is the Lando Norris factor. Lando Norris won his title, and outside of the British media and a very, very loud, minute fan base online, let's just say Zack Snyder fans, for those film fans, it would like a comparison of being very, very vocal, but they're not actually being that many of them. It was waving his world championship and everything, and all the people in the crowd just didn't care, and everyone kept sharing the cars ending when they throw him the cup. But then obviously when the cars memes started going, more were coming out, and then they did the trailer at the start where it was the legend, this, and the runner-up, and obviously the runner-up won it just like F1. So sorry to go on a Formula One tangent, but the timing of us recording this. No, it's fine. When I watched this on the Saturday, so the day before the race, I was sat there like, I'm not spiritual, but something's worked out well there that I'm watching cars.
It sounds like it is exactly the same though as cars.
It is. I mean, this guy won the title because he had team orders to win it. His teammate who's better than him, the rookie, but he's not a rookie, Lightning McQueen, basically, it would have been like if him and Chick were teammates, but then keep making Lightning McQueen move over for Chick to win. That's what it would have been like. But context-wise, worst world champion since 1982. That's what I'm about to say. And I do mean that I have gone back historically. I know my history, and I am very bitter. But sorry to go on a tangent. Your thoughts on Michael Keaton's Chick?
I think he's great. He fits the character so well. Like, again, when you're 5 years old watching this film, you don't go, that's Michael Keaton, he's Batman. Like, you don't know any of this. Yeah. But he's great. Like, it's a shame they recast him. Can't remember who plays him in number 3, but I think it was someone else, not Michael Keaton.
He's in the 3rd film.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. It's not a huge role.
I can't even remember. Sorry, that says more about me.
Yeah, no, he is. And they recast him as someone else, which is a shame that it's not Michael Keaton. But again, it's not hugely noticeable because voice actors, again, they're so talented. They can play, they can do all sorts of voices, even if it is imitating Michael Keaton. But I think Michael Keaton is just great in this as sort of the runner-up, the arrogant. He just wants to do anything to win. And yeah, he's great.
It's what the film needs as well. Like, the legacy of the king is we want to be the next one of him. We want his sponsor. He's a legend. McQueen needs to earn that rather than just win to get that, which is what I like. The film really goes in that message of is what does it actually take to be a champion, because
like he doesn't win the race, but he is still champion.
This is it, and that's what it is. The trophy never makes the man. Well, I don't say man, but you know what I mean. Makes the car in this situation. Oh God, it's the car law. It's going to blow my mind away. Let's talk Radiator Springs. So I'm going to generalize them all together. And I don't mean that to be disrespectful either. The Radiator Springs bunch, I think, I don't want to say make the film. When you've got a core of racing at the front, you need to get away from that for when you're not racing, which I think this film does so well. And I love the idea of this once booming town where so many people have packed up and gone. Again, sorry, raises more questions about the law of cars. But we get the great community of the Radiator Springs where you've got the petrol station, which is their version of, like, I guess you could say a restaurant. The motel are cones. You've got a fire engine for purposes I do not entirely know.
I love Red. He's one of my favorite cars in the whole franchise. He's great.
Voiced by the late, great Joe Ranft as well, which is very much worth adding from this film. I like that community angle. And I think the film works not just due to that. I think if you just put him in another town, right, and not everyone's, I'm not saying there, but you need the variety of the characters, of
They've
the
all got
cars,
their
and the
own
circumstances.
personality, and I think part of that helps in the fact that you can have different types of cars. You know, you've got an army car, you've got a fire engine, a police car. Like, I think that helps in the fact you have all these distinct cars and characters that you don't need to introduce them a whole lot, because, you know, he's a fire engine, that's a fire engine. He's an army car, he's an army sergeant, sort of thing. So I think that really does help in defining these characters, that they are defined by the car that they are.
Agreed. And that is the best way, I think, with those as well. And I don't think you miss out. Even within that group, you get little comedy duos with one another.
Like Fillmore and Sarge.
Yeah. And
Ramon
the
and
light.
Flo.
Do you know that the light is actually blinking slower? Like, they actually did that.
Yeah.
That's proven. And I love the little things like that. And when he's trying to tell him to have his natural gas, his natural fuel, and there's a lot of great humor in there as well, which, again, I don't think these films get the respect they probably should have. And then someone else I really want to talk about is, I've mentioned a lot about racing already. I'm just going to mention something I remember. So when this came out in 2006, I didn't watch F1. I started watching 2007. I was aware of F1 because of Michael Schumacher. The Ferrari stuff in this is hilarious because I don't know. This isn't cars, or this is real world politics now. I've got no idea if Ferrari had to sign off on Pixar using them. The same with Porsche. I don't know what on earth happened there. But the fact that Michael Schumacher has a cameo in this film is remarkable. He was the best racer in the world at this point in time. He had all the records at this point in time. It absolutely made sense that he had a cameo. And not only that, and this answers my questions for the future car films for the celebrity cameos, he did his speaking part in the English version, the German version, the Italian version, and the French version, because he spoke all 4 languages. I think that's remarkable. It's such a minor role, but it's a humongous coup. I think it's great because I know that in the latter Cars films, they would basically use different F1 drivers for the same cars, but in different languages, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So that's worth bringing. That the Michael Schumacher cameo is massive, and I think that gives the film a bit more like industry respect. Like, this is an animated film about racing. Who did you get? Michael Schumacher. You can't. Okay, like, everyone's heard of him, and the whole running gag with, I don't want to call them the Italians, but with the pit stop crew, it is the Ferrari.
Guido.
Yeah, the whole character thing is you're Ferrari, we don't care. We follow European racing, not yours. I think they're a fantastic comedy duo. And again, there's duos within different duos, and it adds a lot. I mean, did you care much for the Schumacher stuff? I don't think you'd have. I know you're not big in the racing.
I mean, when I saw it when I was younger, that meant nothing to me. I didn't know who he was. Now, obviously, I know who Michael Schumacher is, but if you had told me that was a voice actor that sounded a bit like him versus it was actually him, it wouldn't make much difference to me. But it is nice, like you say, for the people that are interested in racing and that recognize these things and know him. And again, for the people in all the different languages that he did it. If you're watching the English version, if you're watching the German version, like, you get to see him and hear him. Well, you don't see him, but you hear him and you recognize him and know it's him.
I'm going to say, so a name that did throw me, this is today threw me, as in not today now, but like this week, Jeremy Clarkson is in this film. Now,
in the UK version, at least.
Yeah, the UK, and this really threw me. So I was first watching, I was like, that sounds a little bit like Jeremy Clarkson. Obviously, 2006 George wouldn't have ever known who he was, wouldn't have cared either. But I was like, that sounds a little like Jeremy Clarkson. Like, did Jeremy Clarkson rock up in a Pixar film? And I'm going to say this, without it being this like big celebrity moment, that feels like the most niche role I've ever seen. Like, for the very specific UK version of Cars, we're going to put the Top Gear host in as the agent. And I think in 2006, Jeremy Clarkson's obviously very popular. Top Gear is back. But I don't think it's like the Jeremy Clarkson of today where everyone knows who he is. Do you know what I mean?
That's something that animated films do a lot. And like, this is crossing over a bit with my day job as well. Like, the fact that they do try and cast all these local versions, you try and cast local celebrities and star talent, and whether that's nowadays, it could be an influencer or a YouTuber or someone, but it will be someone that people in the UK or in the country that you're dubbing it into, they recognize it and they know it. And even some people might go see it just for this person, but it is a small role. It doesn't take too long to get them into the recording studio and record 10 lines or however many it is. But it does provide so much more context and so much more value to the viewers watching it when you recognize that voice. It's like, that's Jeremy Clarkson.
Yeah, it's such a weird. I just think it's the logic of him even being in a film. That's what I think threw me. That, you know how like some celebrities you could just tell, like Piers Morgan or the newsreaders, like anytime they can get on camera, they'll always do it, won't they? But I was like, Clarkson just threw me because it was his voice as well, which kind of makes sense because he probably might have even done it at home.
And also, they like when you watch it and you're like, is that Jeremy Clarkson? And then you go to IMDb and you're looking up and you're like, Harv, and he doesn't come up because obviously he's not in the American one. You've got to dig a bit further to find like, no, it is Jeremy Clarkson, but only in the UK specific versions. Like, he doesn't even come up straight away when you're looking at the cast list, which makes it even more like exciting when you do realize it is him.
I will add, it's nice that the UK had a different version from America. That because they're obviously English language speaking, normally it's just the same blend going in. But I think that was great then that you got the making a little bit more effort. But again, a week ago, someone said that, you're going to be talking about Jeremy Clarkson in the Cars review. I'd have been thinking, if I end up on the wrong channel somewhere, I don't know what's going on. But here we are, and this is what we have been talking some of these characters in. Something else we've got to talk about as well, the soundtrack duty in this film. Randy Newman returns to the score, but it's around maybe going to be a little bit more negative, and I don't think this in a horrible way, because I don't think it's the intention. This is the least Pixar-feeling score. Why, I ask? Because they make the very conscious decision to actually use, I don't want to call it normal music, but that's what most people would say to me. Like, it's contemporary music. There are score designated parts on the soundtrack. There are 12 tracks out of the 21 on the soundtrack that is an original score. And it doesn't feel as punchy as Randy Newman normally does. Not that takes it away from anything, but the focus is obviously on the songs they're playing and the film for the environment, for the scenery.
The memorable part. Like if someone says, tell me about the music of Cars, you immediately go, Life is a Highway. Or you think Real Gone, the song at the start, and it's like the music that you remember more isn't necessarily Randy Newman's score. Not because there's anything wrong with his score, but it's because some of the other music's more memorable.
Yeah, agreed with that. And it threw me because what I've got going in the background, behind the scenes, I've got a best of Pixar playlist that I'm basically updating after every single film, where I'm choosing to listen to the score in isolation, get a bit more research, and then we can chuck in a couple of songs on. I couldn't find Cars for ages, and it made me look really stupid because it was obviously the fact that it's, normally it's original motion picture soundtrack and then the music from, and it's that sort of split. Obviously, it's under the same banner, so it took me a little bit longer to find it. But I do like the music in it. And I think when you're doing a film about cars, let's be honest, the highway, the deserts, those driving, it's the right type of music to play. And you get some old 50s, 60s stuff, which is great. You get more modern stuff, which is absolutely fine as well. And I think it does work. I think it's just so obviously wildly different to the previous Pixar entries. But I guess this is more of a, how to say it nicely, a real life setting that it's about race cars or driving the deserts, iconography, images people are familiar with. So the music would be a little bit different versus, let's say, what would you listen to if you were underwater and there was a shark attack? Or you're a bug and the hopper's coming down. Like, you have, obviously, the cars are experiences that we all know because we've all been in them at some point in our lives. So, weird tangent from me, but it was interesting. But I do like some of the Randy Newman music when he does do his own. You mentioned the race earlier. The race score parts sound great, as you'd expect, and as they are. But one thing, we'll talk about this, and this is always a fun little section, is the legacy section of this. And I'm conscious we've gone over an hour, and I'm surprised to do this will be 45 minutes. So even I've been took over by the cars. I don't know how much of this has been us questioning how the car law works. But
too many questions.
It is. It's like a hydra. Like, cut off one head, two more grow, take its place.
But I want to know: is there someone at Pixar that knows the answers to these? And like another question that I have is: if you go on like the Cars wiki page, there are Piston Cup winners for every single year. Like, there's a Piston Cup winner for 2025. Where are they getting these winners from? Like, are Pixar officially announcing Piston Cup winners? Like, I like to think there is someone at Pixar HQ that knows the answer to every single one of these questions that we're asking.
Are you familiar with Pablo Hidalgo at Star Wars, or do you recognise the name?
No.
Pablo Hidalgo he's on the Lucasfilm Story Group. He's been there decades. Before the dark days of, let's say, Star Wars Twitter, let alone Twitter, he would be on hand just to answer any question from anybody. Like, he knew everything, every character, and his role in the story group, everything went through him. Like, is it possible to take this character at this point in time to put him in the story? And he'd be like, yes, no, I'm not sure. He would answer questions like, what does the circular thing mean on the side of an Empire naval jacket? And he knew he was the guy that had those answers for everything. And it's like Cars needs one. If someone somewhere has,
I have found my calling in life, that's going to be me.
Yeah. It's here we go. These are the DK Visual Dictionaries. I've got an Avatar one now. They need a Cars one, and you could have like a detailed history of the history.
There might even be one of these out there. There probably is.
A Cars Pope conclave. You know,
no,
things
it's a carclave.
like
it's not a conclave. It's a carclave.
See?
Come on, George.
They get the white smoke out of the back. There's so many questions that they could explore, and maybe if they won't do it, you will. That's how I'm going to force you into that livelihood. But it has quite a big legacy, and it was nominated for 2 Oscars: Best Animated Feature and Best Original Song. It did win neither though, but still 2 Oscar nominations, which is great for Pixar. And it did gross $461 million at the box office off its $120 million budget. The 6th highest grossing film of 2006. As mentioned earlier, it spawned 2 sequel films, a TV series spin-off, a plane spin-off, and it would be Pixar's final film before being purchased by Disney. So it does have one hell of a legacy. The one thing I would never want to know the metrics, but I know Cars is huge as well. I believe this is the 2nd biggest franchise for Pixar in respective of merchandise, where obviously Toy Story, Country Mile is at the top of that pack, but Cars was hugely successful. As you've mentioned, right? There are small car models. I'm going to say I've seen Crocs this year.
Yeah.
They're everywhere.
My phone case. You know, like, you can get anything, make it Cars.
When I went to the F1 in 2017 at Silverstone, Cars 3 was coming out. They actually had Owen Wilson at the race. And when we did a tour of the garages, they'd actually put... I couldn't find the photo, so I don't know where it is, but they actually had given one of the garages to Disney, and they put Lightning McQueen in there. And I can't remember the name of the black car in it. Like, was it the villain in the 3rd film? It's like a black car with a blue trim.
Yes. Oh, this is I can't remember his name, but voiced by Armie Hammer.
Oh God, sorry, that's going to be a fun talk when the time comes. Yeah, so they were at Silverstone that year, and it was this huge marketing thing where, like, obviously the drivers have to walk past the cars before the Americans bought F1. I must add, which now F1 has an official sponsorship deal with Disney for next year, so God knows what that's going to look like as the weeks go by. But Cars has obviously had, as we know, a massive, giant legacy. Probably, if I'm allowed to say so, financially the biggest after Toy Story for Pixar. I'm going to admit that. Well, even though they're not my favourite films, they certainly are. Yeah, it's the only other one to have a trilogy until The Incredibles 3 comes out, I guess we could say.
Yeah.
I don't think any of us have had them, especially spin-offs that go elsewhere. But Jed, I want to pick on the spot. I want to know, because we haven't spoke too much about individual moments, individual scenes. Do you have a favourite scene when you think of this film? I know you mentioned the opening earlier.
I think the opening, is great, but then there's also one line that I think is fantastic and one of the best lines in all of the Cars films. It's when Lightning McQueen, he's just discovered Doc Hudson's who he is. He's the Hudson Hornet, and he's telling the other cars, and he goes, he's got 3 piston cups. And Mater replies, he did what in his cup? And it's sort of joke, when you're a kid, that goes over your head completely. But it is just a very funny line that when you realize what's going on, like Mater spits out his drink and it's like, he did what in his cup?
I wouldn't even call it an adult joke. I do miss an animated. You know how back in I don't want to sound like one of them like online people. you know, a fun nod like that, right? It shouldn't mean anything because it's a throwaway line. We don't tend to get the throwaway lines as much because I'm not going to blame the BBFC, but certain places would have to clock because it's their job.
But there are
I'm
other
looking up.
things.
I'm going to bring this up. I've done this every video. I need to find something new to put it. The Sid's Toys merchandise box, from the best things I've ever bought. The one character who is not there is Hooker. Now, at the age of up to the age of 29, I did not know that the Hooker character is obviously because it's got legs and a hook. No child knows what that means. And let's be honest,
there's more stuff like that even in cars. Like you've got the two cars, Mia and Tia, that flash their headlights at Lightning McQueen. They're flashing him. And there's another bit when they're driving and on the side of the road there's a truck stop with convertible waitresses. And it's like, I don't want to know what a convertible waitress is in the Cars universe.
This is it. I don't think it's a bad thing that those things are included. I think where I'm trying to get at with the decades gaps is I think the industry's regulated a little bit more. Is that I'm not sitting here going, woke, gammon, whatever. Like, I just think not just the industries, but regulations, they have to pick up on stuff like that now because they know somewhere, someone like the parent of young people would be the one that's very, my girl's flashed, or you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I think it's just because it's easier for people to complain about that now and there'd be more noise around it if that happens. Whereas if someone complained 20 years ago, it would have been Susan from Doncaster complained to the mums down at Sainsbury's. It wasn't all over the internet.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think it makes it difficult for everyone like working in productions. And I spoke recently about Bad Santa, which those like very different types of comedies than Cars, but those adult film, like those comedies from the mid-noughties that don't tend to exist anymore. And I think Vince Vaughn said studios are scared to make them. And I get it. And I'm not defending them, not making them. I'm not attacking them, not making them. Like, I just get it. Like, it's a tricky environment to maneuver around. And particularly with animated films, family friendly. I love all these jokes. And it does, I think it adds a bit of a kick when you're a bit older because you're picking up on new things that, again, you physically cannot understand as a child. But I also understand why.
It also means for the parents that are taking their kids to see these films, there's something for them as well. It's not just the parents saying, oh, this is another kid, so I got to sit through with my kid to keep them occupied for the day. Like, there's something in it for adults.
Yeah, bang on that, agreed. And I think Pixar were very, very good at doing those, especially in the earlier films, which is very interesting when we get to some of the more modern. And maybe when I watch some of the more modern ones, I'll find some of those more adult things we maybe didn't get before. But I want to talk about final thoughts on Cars because we've been going for almost an hour and a half, crikey. This is probably the most I've ever spoke about Cars, if I'm honest. I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. And I'm glad I've spoken to, I'm going to say, a Cars expert on this because I do think the film is fine. It's not my favourite Pixar film. And as I said, I don't have the attachment of the memories that others will have, which is great because I love hearing different people's backgrounds of different films, the impact it has on them and what it doesn't, especially age groups as well. But I do think this film is overrated, maybe by myself. Maybe the other two films aren't up to the level of this one. I'm saying this now. I've seen each one once. I've seen each film once, so I can't remember pretty much anything from any of them. So I get to use this series as a nice way to go back to them to see how are they. But I thought this film is fine. I get why it's so popular. I understand why it's a huge thing for different people. And as we kind of said at the very beginning, you know, would have been at different points of our lives when we introduced these, and that does have an effect on how often you choose to go back to something, even if you want to say nostalgia. But it is interesting with a film like Cars, and I have enjoyed rewatching it, and I have enjoyed chatting about it. And yeah, it's been a lot more positive than I thought it'd be, which is great because I don't like jumping on beers and being really down. I always feel a bit rude as a host about if you do that, but I've liked the discussion. So I'm going to say a big thank you to you. This is my final thoughts on the film. This isn't me running out a video, just my final thoughts on the film. Yeah, Cars, not as bad as everyone says. That's like my overstatement of the year.
I'm glad I've managed to bring you around a bit on Cars, and you're not a Cars hater because there are so many Cars haters out there. And it's like, I watched this film so many times when I was younger. And then as I watched it more as I've been older, it's like, I've got older and I've realized every time I watch it, I do sort of worry. It's like, am I going to watch it and be like, this isn't as great? And it is just the childhood memories I've got attached to it. And every time I watch it, I'm like, no, this is actually a great film. Like, yes, I've got memories attached to it. And I do have a bias because of that. And I am going to rate it higher than other films or than other people might rate it. But I do watch it every single time and think, yeah, this is a great film. This is a 5-star film.
And that's it. I'm not going to go as far as 5-star for me, but it has. We've all had that. There will be a film. I wouldn't know which one's yours. You loved it as a kid. You watched it as an adult. And you're like, oh no, put your head down. Oh no, not me. And it is fear. It's a fear for almost every film I grew up with. Particularly, I find like comedies.
Being an adult that is interested in films and is not to use like terms like cinephile and stuff like that, but when you've got friends that are interested in films and it's like they might take the mickey out of you for liking Cars and not Citizen Kane, but it's like you do worry if I say to someone I prefer Cars to Citizen Kane, which I do, Citizen Kane's a great film, but I would rather watch Cars than Citizen Kane, and I don't care if that makes me any less of a cinephile or a film fan. I prefer Cars to Citizen Kane.
I'm with you. I think without me berating a lot of cinephiles, but I'm always happy to do so. There are certain people who don't seem to understand a different word from favourites to bests.
Yeah.
I don't want to be arrogant, but I'm gobsmacked, and I mean this like off the record as well. Well, on the record, but off the record too. Whenever someone's like, no, favourite and best are the same, I'm like, no, you just don't have literacy. Like, yeah, I just wrap my head around, the best film I've ever seen in my life is certainly not my favourite film of all time. And I wish it was, but it's probably not ever going to be that for many, if any, people. And then that'll be subjective of to A, what you enjoy, B, what you think is good. But when some people
I would always say that favourite is better, not necessarily better, but more important than best. You know, I have a list on Letterboxd of my favourite films, and it's 200 odd films. I don't have a list of the best films. I could probably make one, but I don't care about what I think the best films are. I want to know about what my personal favourites are.
Exactly. It's personality. It says a lot about you. And not in a horror way, but people get to read you. Okay, what do they enjoy?
Yeah.
Have they got a sense of humour? Are they morbidly depressed? Like, you can work out a lot from someone from film. And it's an interesting metric with this. It's a great way to round out this chat as well. Because as I said, it's a film. It's like Fred from Scooby-Doo, the classic behind the scenes where they're all talking about, why they were so attracted. It was a role that was going to do all this brilliant stuff. And because Fred is like, it's a talking dog. Like, what as an actor, why can't he want to be in it? Because he wants to be a talking dog. I get it.
Yeah.
Like, it's great. Be honest with it. And so many people like it does my head in. So you can always tell, I don't want to go on too much of a tangent, the people who, not the film bros, that's a bit unfair, but when certain films crop up by certain people on certain thoughts.
Yeah.
And sometimes, not saying all these people, sometimes it's just so obvious that they saw it on a list and think they have to say that too.
And when it's performative, you can just tell.
Yeah, you could always, because then you ask them about it and they don't really seem to want to talk about it too.
They can only tell you the historical significance that this was the first shot that did the such and such zoom or something like that. And it's like, yeah, but that doesn't mean you enjoyed it.
Exactly. What we can have another discussion. That'd be great. But I know time is short. But people watching at home, this has been our Cars review, which has been amazing. I said we've gone almost an hour and a half. And you may be wondering what is coming up next for Pixar. Wow, look at the screen. It's in the Pixar Retrospective. Next up, we have Ratatouille, followed by WALL-E, followed by Up, and then into Toy Story 3, which is quite something. We're already seeing February on the board, he says, recording at the start of December. But for anyone that is curious, as I said, this is the first Pixar video 2026. Cars is celebrating its 20th anniversary this year. I didn't even notice that point in time. Yeah. But it is worth noting that we are batch recording some of these. It was the Christmas break. I didn't want to be spamming people across this time of year to be doing videos. It's not easy to do so. So I'm thanking everybody that comes on them. I've been able to get ahead of time, give myself a bit of breathing room, take my time with some editing, look at bringing on some more people. This first batch was integral, and I really appreciate that. And Jed, this is the last one I'm going to be doing pre-Christmas as well, which is always great. for people who haven't seen you on our channel before, because I'm trying to think last time I had you on for something. Did you do the Walt Disney Top 10? It's been a while. You're very busy with your work, and I know that as someone that's worked in the industry before, I'm not going to ask questions, but you still do some of the stuff you used to do before. So what have you had up on your YouTube channel recently that we can get people to go and see?
Yeah, over on my YouTube channel, Wagman Studios, I've got my 2025 movie mashup, which is almost 7 minutes of over 200 films released in 2025, all put together in one video.
It's an annual series. Everybody, please check that out. Maybe you're catching up to some films you missed from last year. It sounds so weird saying it in the past for you guys watching at home, but the future for us. But everybody, as always, please do check out Jed on there. He's been on some other stuff. We had him on the Spielberg retrospective, going all the way back to COVID, the Marvel retrospective as well. There would have been a couple of other things in between, I'm sure, but it's been a while. You're very busy with your work. That I cannot say any more about. People watching at home, I know you don't use Twitter anymore, do you?
I'm still on there a little bit. Yeah, Jed Wagman on Twitter. I go and lurk and occasionally post the odd thing or two.
That's very fair. Well, people, follow Jed. Check out the YouTube video. What else is going on for us? We're heading into the new year. I'll be honest, guys. I haven't looked at my 2026 calendar since, let's say, if I made it for the Pixar retrospective. I don't have series mapped out. I don't know what new releases are coming this week. We're heading into Oscar season. Things are going to get busy. There might need to be some new reviews. There might need to not be. And at the time of recording, something very exciting should be happening tomorrow. But should that fail, I will not have the arrogance to talk about what I've been up to and what videos you'll find. But if I've been successful, there will be 4 videos on this said event that will be up. And the most recent one would have been up on the 2nd of January, just gone. So that's all I'm going to say. I'm going to leave it very enigmatic. And that's how I'm going to round up this video. Jed, once again, thank you so much for jumping on, for taking time out of your very busy day. No, that's okay. The pleasure is all mine. Thank you so much for talking cars. To everybody at home who's been commenting, thank you all so much. We'll see you on the next one.